What an absolutely wild month for reading November was for me. I read two of my absolute favourite books so far this year, one of which was a book club pick, and I also read two of the books I have enjoyed the least and yet still finished. Let's have a look at all of them and record them in my reading journal, as well as set up some cute and cozy stats pages for December. Hi, I'm Erin, and I don't think I'm gonna hit my reading goal this year, and that's okay. I'm currently sort of jumping between two reading journals because I filled up the big one, so I moved into the small one, but some of my big trackers are still applicable. However, I have filled up the list of books read in my old journal, so I'm just gonna update that in my new journal. These are all books that I have read since October. My reading really slows down when I get busy, which is, I think, natural but unfortunate, so I have read a lot less in the second half of this year than I read in the first half of this year, just because I've had less time on my hands. I also usually reserve a lot of things through the library, and because I was away traveling in October, I didn't spend the time reserving things that I maybe usually would have, so I just had less things kind of available to me, and that is okay. There's nothing like the Available Now section of your library app. We're doing some foreshadowing here by listing out the titles of all of the books that we're going to make review pages for in the coming 40 minutes or so. And something I think is really interesting is that the two books that I mentioned earlier that I loved are amongst the books that I have seen listed quite a few times in the entries for my reading journal of Destiny, which is a reading journal that I've fully set up for next year that I am giving away on my channel. I'm actually announcing the winner tomorrow, so if this video has been up for more than 24 hours, sorry, you can't enter anymore, but if it's just gone up and you're an early adopter of Erin's content, then you can still enter. I've kind of got two goal trackers on the go. One is the bookshelf, which is way more fun, and the other one is this kind of square one, which was trying to get me to 100. There's also 100 books on the bookshelf too. That was my goal for the year, and Goodreads is saying that I'm quite a few behind. Actually, Goodreads and Storygraph have different opinions on this because I've logged things a little differently across them. With Goodreads, earlier in the year, I finished a compendium, a little collection of books called The Improbable Meet Cute, and I logged each of the short stories separately with Goodreads but as one book in Storygraph. Goodreads says I'm only 2 books behind, Storygraph says I am 6 books behind, so that's fun. But I've decided not to sweat it. I'm not going to try and read shorter books just to make it up to the goal or anything like that. I'm just going to cruise along and find out how many is natural for me to finish and be okay with that. Just updating my book club pages here. I've got one in my old journal and one in my new journal. Probably a bit redundant to have this information twice, but I'm enjoying filling it out, so it's fine. The Page Majors book club is my book club that I run through the channel membership program here on YouTube, so my channel members who join on the highest level, which is called Page Majors, get access to my book club, which is run through my private Discord server, which you can only access if you're a member of the channel. We read one book every month and we have a little call to discuss it within the Discord as well. In November, we read Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, which was suggested by Judy, and in December, our book is Last Call at the Local, which is a rom-com written by Sarah Grunda Ruiz, and this one was suggested by our member Emma. If you're interested in joining in with our December read, or if you'd like to get in on the action for next year, you can hit the join link down next to my channel name. There's also one in the description, or you can use the QR code on screen to find out some more. But for now, we're going to fully switch into the new journal and fill out the progress tracker for November. This is just a visual representation of how long it takes me to read each book. There's really no point to me tracking this data, I just like doing it. I think it looks cool, I think it's interesting. I don't really use this information for anything, I just really like doing it. I think it looks cool. I did all of my reading journal updating across only 2 sessions right at the end of the month this time, so this information was pretty complete the first time I sat down to fill it out, which is why we can do basically the whole calendar in one go. If you're interested in how I set up my November tracking pages, you can check out the video from last month because I make one of these every single month. I was really feeling the autumn vibes because I was just back from a trip to the UK, so even though it was really coming into summer, it was late spring for us here in Australia, I wanted to just live in that world a little bit longer. I used some watercolor and some cute autumnal feeling stickers, and I'm trying to match my markers to update this tracker to go with the theme as well, so that everything looks nice and cohesive, even though the book covers have all sorts of wacky colors in them that don't go with the theme. I actually don't mind that at all. I don't know why my brain doesn't really see them as part of the decorative parts of the layout, so it doesn't count, I guess. I'm just making myself a list on a sticky note of the book covers that I need to print so that I can continue and set everything up for this theme. I like to print 4 at a time, so writing them out helps me to recognize when I have enough to do a sheet. And I typically need 2 of each book cover because one goes on this page where the progress is, and I keep all of my star rating and CAWPILE number information here so I can see that at a glance, but I also need a second one to go on its actual review spread, which comes a little bit later in the monthly setup. Which is what we're ready to do now, actually, because we've just about finished with this progress update here, so let's move on to the very first of my review spreads for this setup, which is Ledge by Tracy McEwan. I have been so ready to do this one. I found some perfect stickers and decorative elements in my stash, so I've been ready to jump on this one for a while. I just had all the stuff already in my journal ready to go. This book I actually started on my trip around the UK. I started it on the plane on the way over and finished it on the plane on the way back, but we didn't land back in Australia until it was technically November, so it didn't go into the October spreads. This is a fantasy story by an Australian author, and it's set in a very icy and cold and unforgiving world, which is why I'm going with all of this kind of snowy stuff. Most of the decorative elements I'm using for these pages, because I am liking to do Dutch doors at the moment for my pretty review pages in this journal to use up more pages because I want to try and finish it by the end of the year, and I only started it in September. Most of my decorations for Ledge's spread came from Sticky between 2 of their packs, the Winter Riders Retreat and the Swan Lake sets. As always, I'll try to link you to as much of what I'm using as I can. Sometimes stuff goes out of stock by the time I use it, so I'll do my best. I'll try and find you alternatives where I can, but everything hopefully will be linked in the description. I also use a lot of stuff in reading journal setups, so I may have to leave some links out just because of character limits in YouTube video descriptions, but I'll do my best. Now, if Stacey McEwan's name sounds familiar to you and you spend any time in the fantasy novel areas of TikTok, that's probably because you've seen her on TikTok. She makes those hilarious videos where it's like the Australian girl being presented with situations that commonly happen in fantasy novels and her reacting like a regular Aussie girl might. She is really funny, and I was really surprised because this book is really serious. Our main character, Dawson, is a young woman who has to really struggle to survive on the ledge, which is this like frozen tundra edge of a cliff that she is stuck on with her community, which is very competitive. They're all just trying to survive, so sometimes it's a bit dog eat dog, you know? And once a year, these big fantastical bird type things called glacians come and take a sacrifice, take an offering of a human from the ledge. If it's sounding a little bit Hunger Games to you right now, you wouldn't be wrong, but after that it does get quite different. She's not taken to compete in a deadly trial kind of a situation. No one actually knows what happens to them once they're taken from the ledge, but we just assume that they are eaten or dropped to their deaths or something. But it turns out that is not the case. I don't want to go into it too much and give you spoilers. I try to avoid spoilers in my voiceovers, but there is a whole other world out there and it's full of even more dangerous things, so it's not the most original story, but I didn't feel like I was especially mad at it for being derivative either. And it's always nice to read something written by an Australian author too. Some scenes are quite grim and violent, some of it is quite lighthearted and romantic, there is a love story involved as well. But it certainly wasn't like edge of your seat gripping for me. I didn't find myself thinking about it when I wasn't reading it. I wouldn't have got through it as quickly as I did if I wasn't stuck on a plane, especially one of my flights. My screen didn't work, so I read a lot on that flight because I didn't really have much other choice. But I did also enjoy it. I think I will continue the series, but it's not a priority for me right now. I did think the magic system in this book was quite interesting. It's not like something I've come across before, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist already. It's just not something that I've personally come across in a story before. Actually, maybe I should try to prioritize the next book in this series in January or February because it's summer here in Australia and it would be nice to feel icy and cold, or at least read about feeling icy and cold because summer here is no joke. I think I've worked out a format for my reviews in this journal that I really like because this is a traveler-sized journal, which means it's much smaller than any reading journal I've used before or even bullet journal I've used before. I really enjoy making the front page kind of pretty and decorated and adding a little Dutch door element where I tear or cut some of the right page off and add my review on the back of that flap so it's kind of hidden. You can see the pretty thing without seeing all of the text necessarily. I really enjoy the expressive aspect of the reading journal, finding things in my collection that I can use that represent the book in some way. But I also really like having space to write my thoughts about the book, so this way I get the best of both worlds without having to try and cram it all into one spread. And I'm still using the CAWPILE rating system until the end of the year. I will be changing it up for next year, but for now, consistency is king, and I've been using it for the last 11 months, so I have to do this one too. The star rating I'm giving this one based on the CAWPILE rating is 3.5. That's a pretty typical liked it but wasn't obsessed with it kind of a rating for me when I'm using this system, which I did not devise. Another wonderful YouTuber who makes videos about books came up with the CAWPILE rating system. Her name is G, and her channel's called Book Roast. And she has videos about the rating system in case you want to check those out. I'm actually going to try and devise my own rating system for next year, but I haven't really thought too hard about how it's going to work yet, so watch this space. The next 2 books I need to make review pages for, I really didn't enjoy, to the point where, even though I just told you I'm really enjoying making these Dutch door spreads for my book reviews, these ones don't warrant it. I don't want to do that because I didn't like them enough. The first of these is The Awakening, which is the first book in the Zodiac Academy series. My friend's sister loves these books, and we have usually somewhat similar tastes, so I thought I would give it a go based on that. I had just finished an audiobook on my trip, and I wanted to start a new one on a train while I was journaling, and this one was available immediately through the library with no hold period, and it was the graphic audio version. I'd never listened to one of those before, so I thought, let's give it a go. You guys, I am so confused by this book. I was like, what am I listening to? First of all, graphic audio, if you've never listened to one of those audiobooks before, is where they have music and sound effects and a different cast member for each character. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think I have listened to some audiobooks that were Audible originals before that had that kind of thing going on, but they're always cheesy as heck anyway, as like the source material, so it wasn't too bad to have this like cheesy graphic audio thing going on. But for this book, for this Zodiac Academy book, I was like, what is happening? I was also very astounded to find out that this book came out in 2019 when I was adding it to my Goodreads, because it reads like something from like 2008. It's like The Vampire Diaries meets Pretty Little Liars. The teachers at this school act really inappropriately towards the students. There's a lot of bullying, there's a lot of hazing, everyone's awful to each other all the time. I didn't like it, and I will not be continuing the series. I don't even know how I managed to give it 2 stars because it was not my cup of tea at all. I stuck around to see if it would get better, and it never did. And the second book here, this is actually my first non-fiction book of the year. I was in Dart Books in London and I saw this on a shelf, and all of the recommendations on the book cover sounded really amazing. So I added it to my library holds right there in the store. This book is called I Want to Die But I Want to Eat Tteokbokki. It's by Baek Sehee, and it was originally written in Korean. It's been translated to English. It is the author's memoir based on the recordings that she made of her therapy sessions. And based on that alone, I feel like I don't want to say mean things about this book because it is someone's very personal experience. And you have to be very brave and very honest to put a book like this out there. But I was very uncomfortable reading it, which isn't necessarily a sign that something is bad, but no, I wouldn't do it again. I don't know if it was a cultural thing that I was missing. I do know quite a bit about Korean culture. I studied Korean language for a little while, but I don't know. This one just, it wasn't a hit for me. And I can't use the CAWPILE rating system to rate it because it's not a fiction book. So I've kind of just picked a rating based on my enjoyment, and we've just moved on to the next one. Yay, now we get to talk about a book that I loved. This one is for Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, and I have the perfect little piece of spacey scrapbooking paper, so that's just going to be the whole basis for decorating this one. This was our Page Majors read for November, and I will be forever grateful to Judy for suggesting this one because it was pretty much a hit. We did have a few people who found some flaws with it that I did not notice on my read-throughs, and they made very valid points when we talked about it in our book club chat. But for me, if I was rating purely on vibes like I did last year in my reading journal, this one would have been a 5-star. It did not end up being a 5-star because that's really, really hard to do with the CAWPILE rating system, which is part of why I'm not taking it with me into 2025. But I loved this book, despite not even really being much of a sci-fi gal. This is one of those we must save the world from absolute destruction kind of sci-fi novels, which isn't usually my jam, but this one's done so beautifully and so compassionately. You follow the main character across 2 timelines, one on Earth when everything's going into chaos, and one in space when things are being hopefully fixed or supposed to be working on fixing them. And this story has one of my favorite characters I have ever come across in any book ever. And we all agreed that we would die for him in our book club chat, even those who found other parts of the book a little less enjoyable. And I can't really tell you any more than that without spoiling it, but this is coming out as a movie in 2026. The cast have been, well, some of the cast members have been announced. I don't know if I necessarily agree with them. I have some thoughts, but if this is on your list of things to read before the movie comes out, then I recommend moving it up, making it a priority so you can really enjoy the experience without any of the influence of trailers and stuff. I have a Hall of Fame spread in my reading journal that I haven't actually updated at all yet, but this one will definitely go on there. The actual review part of this one is going to look a bit different because I like to come up with some questions to kind of guide our discussion when we have our book club chats. So this time, instead of just writing my review kind of straight out of my brain, pouring it onto the page, I'm adding our questions and then answering them in my journal for myself. If you're enjoying this video so far, I wanted to take a moment to invite you to hit the like button, and if you haven't already and you'd like to see more of this kind of thing from me, you can hit subscribe and get more of this content from me. I post twice a week, sometimes reading journal, sometimes bullet journal, sometimes general stationery content, and we always have a good time. I've scored this one 8.28 on the CAWPILE rating scale, which gives it 4.5 stars, which is pretty great. Let's flip back to my progress spread as well so I can make sure I update that information over there too, because I like to have it all in one place. Once we've got that information down, it's time to print some new book covers because I can't do my next spread without them. I'm still using my HP sprocket to print 4 little book covers at a time, and I have a short about how I do this. I'll have that linked in the description for you or up in the cards in the top right. The HP sprocket is a nifty little mini printer that works over Bluetooth with your phone. It doesn't need any ink to print. It uses something called Zink technology, Z-I-N-K, and somehow that makes the image appear on the paper with heat instead, but you do have to use the special zinc paper, which usually has a sticky back, which is really convenient for me. Canon also make a printer that works like this. It's called the Ivy, and there are probably other options out there too from brands that I just haven't come across yet. And now that we have a book cover for it, I can make my review spread for A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson, which I liked even more than Project Hail Mary. I got this nifty little label thing from Journal Say recently, and I thought that would be perfect for A Good Girl's Guide to Murder because it's a mystery story. Our main character, Pip, is a high school student, and she is doing for her senior project type thing an investigation into a murder of a student from her school who was supposedly murdered by another student from her school, but she's pretty convinced that the murderer did not murder anyone. When I tell you nothing has made me feel this way since Veronica Mars, please understand my full meaning because I loved Veronica Mars and I still rewatch it pretty regularly. Actually, every few years I cut my hair short, and that's usually because I've been watching season 1 of Veronica Mars and I just love how it looks on Kristen Bell so much. Even though we don't look at all alike, I end up cutting my hair too. I don't read a lot of mysteries, and usually they kind of have the very murdery, gruesome, kind of cold feeling about them. Even stories that people have told me are supposed to be cozy mysteries, I generally don't find very cozy at all, but this one I really enjoyed. And I think that's because it's coming from a place of compassion. The whole story, Pip is saying, no, actually, I don't think this person really did murder anyone, and she's trying to clear this guy's name for his family and get to the bottom of what really happened, and she's noticing things that the police didn't pick up. Is that sounding like anyone? Maybe a little Veronica Mars. And because she's a 17-year-old girl, she's obviously quite sensitive in the way that she's investigating this. You know, she's considerate of people's feelings and not trying to make anyone upset or bring up any bad things for them. It's YA, but I don't think it feels immature at any point. I think that just makes it really easy to read, and I think it still has value and merit as a book for someone older, as a 37-year-old woman myself. And I hear this one has also been adapted for screen. The ebook version that I read that I got from the library had like the Netflix tie-in screen cover, but I don't think I'll be watching it because all advice I'm hearing is that it's really bad. So that's a shame because this book was great and I could see how this could make a really excellent and engaging TV series if it was done well, but it doesn't sound like it was, and that's just such a shame. Also, this was my first time ever using this little label maker thing, and I was still getting the hang of it. It doesn't have an apostrophe, so I put a full stop thinking that would be better, and somehow I accidentally put a dash in between A and good, but I didn't want to waste it, so I'm just going to use it as is. Probably because I don't read a lot of mysteries, I don't have a lot of stationery that I feel really works with mystery kind of vibey books, so I'm trying to do the best I can with what I have here. Obviously going for a bit of a case file-y sort of looking thing with the heading text there, and I'm bringing in some red because the book cover has some red on it. It's like the red string that you would put on a murder board kind of investigative Pinterest board of death. And I've used this brown washi tape from Paper Monogatari as well, which has this kind of vintage newspaper look to it. I thought that could tie in maybe as a research kind of a thing, like looking at old records, or maybe it could pull a little bit textbooky, and our main character is in high school and trying to get into university or college, so maybe it is applicable in that way too. Doesn't really matter, because it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be cute, and I think it is cute. Actually, it doesn't have to be cute, but I did want it to be cute, and I do think that it is. Something to know about me is that I very rarely will read the consecutive books in a series back to back unless I'm really, really gripped by the ending of the previous one, and this was one of the cases where I considered going straight on to the next book of the series immediately after this one, partly because it was available through my library straight away, but I ended up deciding not to do it. I don't think it will be far away though. I think I'll probably want to read it pretty soon. According to my CAWPILE rating, I'm giving this one 8.57, which is going to give it another 4.5 star rating because of how the system works, but this one again is 5 stars in my heart. And if it seems a little silly to you that I'm sticking to this system, I don't know, it seems a little silly to me too, but because I've done it all year, I just feel like I will not be comfortable switching it up now because some of the other things in the beginning of my first journal are based on how the CAWPILE rating system works, so I need that to have those other things function, so it's okay, it doesn't matter, it's not that serious. Let's add that star rating onto the progress page as well as the CAWPILE rating number so that I can see at the end of each month. I like to have in my reading stats what the standout book from the previous month was, so having the numbers right there makes it much easier for me. Here's a book I actually forgot about and had to add later, and that is Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood, which I chose to DNF, which stands for do not finish or did not finish. Which is a shock, because I usually really enjoy Ali Hazelwood's work, but this one had a lot of red flags for me, unfortunately. She does say in the foreword that this one is more of an erotic fiction story than it is a rom-com like she usually writes, and that wasn't really the issue for me. It was more about like the way the male main character was thinking about the female main character. I just couldn't get behind it. I am not sure if I'll go back and finish it, but for now I returned my library hold and I was like, that'll do, pig, that'll do. Our next review spread is going to be the last one for this video, and then we'll get stuck into the December cover page and the stats pages for December. This is actually another title that I came across when I was in a bookshop in the UK. This time it was a Waterstones in Glasgow, and my partner was using the loo and I was just waiting for him to come out, and I saw this one that was actually not this book, it was the next one in the series. It was called A Pirate's Life for Tea, and I went, I'll go on then, and I immediately looked it up in the library again and I put it on hold, and when my hold came through I realized it was actually the second in the series and not the first, and that I should probably start with the first book. Thankfully, the first book was available so I could borrow it straight away, and that is this one, and it's called Can't Spell Treason Without Tea by Rebecca Thorne. As an avid lover of tea, that was just the perfect title for me. I was like, of course I have to read these books. This series is cozy fantasy, which I haven't had too much experience with. I've read Legends and Lattes and the prequel to that one, Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldry, and I thought they were okay. I don't dislike cozy fantasy as a genre, but I don't think I enjoy it as much as the more high stakes kind of stuff, just a personal thing. But if you did really enjoy Legends and Lattes, there's a solid chance you would really enjoy this book book as well, because there's a lot of similarities, there's a lot of overlap. This one is also a sapphic romance. It's a little bit more dual main characters than having one main character like Legends and Lattes kinda does. Rhaena is a prominent member of the Queen's Guard in this fictional kingdom, and Kianth is a very prominent mage and kind of an advisor to the people of the kingdom. She's also a griffin rider, which hey, that is so cool. They've been secretly dating and stealing moments together for a couple of years, but never really get to spend any extended time with each other, and they decide to run away and open a bookshop and tea house together. So we're focusing on tea instead of coffee, but the concept is essentially the same, right? And they have a little found family kind of element in their new home, and of course there are conflicts and things go wrong, but it wouldn't be a very interesting story if we didn't have that. Keeping in mind that, as I mentioned, I'm not usually super into cozy fantasy, it's not something that I really live for, I did feel like this one was a bit underwhelming coming off the back of two other books that I really, really loved, but I didn't think it was bad either. This one's kind of like a lukewarm one for me. I have the next book still ready to go on my phone through the library, but I haven't started it yet because I'm reading our December Page Mages book first. I'm not entirely sure if I will get around to it or if I'll kind of choose to go with something else, prioritize another book over it, but I think eventually I'll end up reading it just because it's cute. I like tea. It's fine. It's kind of a low stakes thing to listen to, and it's good for putting on while you're doing other things in this instance with an audiobook. So I like to listen to audiobooks while I'm setting up journals. I'm currently working on the mystery journal for next year, so I have a lot of that to do, and it's just really good for that kind of thing because it's easy to follow while you're doing something else. My CAWPILE rating for Can't Spell Treason Without T was 5, which makes it a flat 3 stars. And it was the last book that I finished in November, which means we can now update my reading stats for the month. In November, I finished a total of 6 books. I read 2,488 pages or equivalent, and the average time to read a book for me was 9 days this month, which is actually, I think, an improvement from last month. Because my ratings were all over the place this month, it's dragged my average down to 3.25 as my average star rating. I read in the genres of fantasy, romance, YA, thriller, sci-fi, psychology, mystery, and memoir. For format, I always skew more towards audio just because I am able to multitask while I listen to those. So 67% audio and 33% digital for me this month. 17% of the books I read had less than 300 pages and 83% had between 300 and 499 pages. I like using the tags function on Storygraph to add some extra data around how many of the books I read were through the library versus that I paid for, and it was 66% library this time, and then kind of an even split between one Audible and one book that I bought. And I will put a book cover here eventually, but for now, this is where A Good Girl's Guide to Murder is going to go as my standout book for November. Now let's get set up for December. We're going to do a cover spread, the progress spread, and then a spread for my December reading stats. I hadn't tried waterfall tabs in the traveler size journal yet, so I thought it would be fun to just jump in and give it a go. And I'm going to be using some kind of muted Christmas colors for this one because I've done not Christmassy things in my own bullet journal, and I wanted to use this lovely Books and Cats PET tape from the washi tape shop somewhere just because it's so cozy and lovely. And I was pulling some of the colors from that and it had green and red in it, and I was like, well, couldn't go wrong. I'm also pulling some beige tones from that one, so the washi tape with the text on it is from Paper Monogatari, and the text that is on it is actually some of the text of Pride and Prejudice, which is just so cool. The deep red coloured washi tape is from Muji, and the green check gingham one is from Stationery Pal. If you like the idea of waterfall tabs but you're not too sure how to approach them, I actually made a video all about it recently, so I'll have that linked in the description for you. To make these ones, I removed 3 dot grid spaces from each page, or 2 from the first one because I counted the outside edge of the page as a dot grid space, and I'm mirroring the washi tape sequence on the other side of the cover spread too so that things look really symmetrical. Most of the time when I'm doing waterfall tabs, I also like to round the corners of those cut pages so they look really intentional and like they just came that way from the beginning, and I have this handy little corner rounding tool to do that with. And I thought it would be fun to include something to warm up the middle of this space, and this is a library card from a little notepad that came with an Archer and Olive subscription box last year, the vintage library one. It's made to look like a library card, which I thought was too perfect, obviously, for a reading journal, but it is pretty thick card, so I'm just scoring it down the middle, not cutting all the way through, but just giving it a little score with my craft knife so that it folds with the page a little bit easier. And now I'm just placing stickers from the PET tape sticker roll. Gosh, I love these pre-cut ones. Anywhere that I feel like needs it, leaving a bit of room in the middle for my December header, which I'm gonna try and do with a dip pen. I'm finding that fountain pen inks don't play too nicely with the Archer and Olive journals, which I think the fountain pen people have known for a while, but I thought that putting it on top of this card would be a good buffer, and so I jumped in with the dip pen and with a little sample that I have of Diamine's Rider's Blood that I got from a friend. I've used this before in my bullet journal for August, and it's just such a beautiful colour, goes so beautifully with the deep reds in this theme, but I had a bit of trouble. I was going for something copperplate. It kind of didn't turn out too well because the ink was flowing really unevenly. Granted, the journal pages are also not especially flat. I've been putting lots of stuff in this journal, so it's kind of bulbous now. And I've got some like patchy, blotchy ink where a lot came off the pen in one go, and other spots where it was nice and other spots where it ran out. So I'm pretty out of practice. Usually if I'm going to do something copperplate, I'll do a little warm up first. I didn't for this one. I just jumped in and then I sort of gave up on the copperplate towards the end. Also with my flourishing here, I'm not stoked with it. I really messed up the flourishing that we'll get to in a second around the letter D at the beginning there. It's fine. I actually kind of like the blotchiness. It sort of adds to the vintage feeling a little bit, I think, because not everyone had perfect handwriting back in the day, you know? But it is legible. And I've been taking a calligraphy class recently, not in copperplate lettering, in italic. Maybe I should have done that instead, but that's okay. And one of the tips that I got from my teacher is that she puts her ink bottle in like a kitchen sponge that she has cut a bit out of on her table so it can't fall over. I am just using this little vial, but I thought I would take some inspiration from her and put it inside a washi tape roll so I can't knock it over, and it worked pretty well. Now we can fill up the rest of the negative space with more stickers. Moving on to the progress spread here, this one is going to be the calendar at the top and the space for book covers underneath. Again, very similar to last month but without the extra space on the side. I'm making my calendar boxes each 4 dot grid spaces tall by 3 dot grid spaces wide, so I have lots of room to track multiple books at once. I don't usually have more than 2 on the go at a time, but it does happen occasionally, so I just like to build in some flexibility there just in case. And I've decided to wrap around the 30th and 31st of December up onto the top row to line up with the 1st, so that I'm not using extra space down the bottom because I want to save that space for book covers. Here's a little peek at what I'm reading right now. These are both books that I started in the month of November and hadn't finished yet, still haven't finished either of them. And they are Gwen and Art Are Not in Love by Lex Croucher and Last Call at the Local by Sarah Gronder Ruiz, which, as I mentioned earlier, is our Page Majors book club read for the month of December, and I'm trying to make sure I get it done early so I can get the questions out to everyone to answer. I'm also including this little tribute to the kitty cat Peaches that we are currently pet sitting for my partner's parents. She loves to scratch a chair, she does, so I'm making sure she gets to do that in the journal here. She's not a ginger cat, but she has some ginger on her. I don't anticipate that I'll be reading more in December than I did in November, so this will probably be plenty of space for me to put book covers, but if I need more, I'll just do another page. It's okay. And for my December statistics page, I'm using pretty much the same format as I did for November, but on the right page, I'm going to be bringing back my pie charts because I've been enjoying them. I like the kind of graphic element that they bring to the page, so it'll have all of the same stats as the one that we just filled out for November, just a slightly different format on the right side. very happy to be imprecise with my pie charts, so I'm using the inside of a washi tape roll that is just a decent size for the page, and I'm not measuring out where they're gonna go, I'm really just eyeballing it, and I think that is just fine. And once we have all of the space to track stats down on the page, it's time to add some cats and book stickers as well. Most of the stickers on this PET roll are pretty big, so I was trying to make sure I was leaving room for those to fit in places, but I can also get away with using some of the smaller ones in between the pie charts, and I really like how that looks.
Yeah.
And with that, all of my review spreads for November are done and my December pages are ready to go. So let's have a little flip through of everything that we've just done together. I'll be setting up my reading journal for 2025 pretty soon, so keep an eye on the channel for that one. I'm moving from the traveler's size into a square 8x8 inch journal, and that's going to be quite a difference. Make sure you're subscribed if you wanted to stick around for that one, and you can also turn on notifications if you want to be amongst the first to see it. I went through a bit of a reading slump through sort of September and October, but I feel like I'm back having read 2 really good books in November, and I hope that December has more really good books in store for me too. I'm curious about how you're going with any reading goals you may have set for yourself for the year, because clearly I am behind on mine and I'm probably not going to reach it. Are you going to reach yours, and how are you feeling about it? If you've made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you so much for sticking around. Please make sure that you leave some kind of a book emoji in your comment so that I know that you made it all the way to the end. And while you're at it, make sure to let me know what your favorite read of November was too, because I always love hearing your recommendations. If you're going to be using a B5 journal for your reading journal next year, here is a link to a video I made recently setting up one of those that I'm actually giving away. And underneath that is a link to a playlist of all of my reading journal videos from 2024, so you can see everything that I've read this year if you like.